Welcome to the Filmcast review of Bad Boys Ride or Die. I'm David Chen here with Jeff Kanata. The plot summary of Bad Boys Ride or Die, according to the internet. Quote, when their late police captain gets linked to drug cartels, wisecracking Miami cops Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett embark on a dangerous mission to clear his name, end quote. Joining us today for our review, he is an actor who has appeared in TV shows and films like The League and Fresh Off the Boat. He's also going to be the upcoming movie Twisters, hitting theaters later this summer. He's the co-host of the popular movie podcast How Did This Get Made and the author of the new book, Joyful Recollections of Trauma. Paul Scheer, welcome back to the Filmcast.
I am so excited to be here. And truly, not a better movie to talk about. I feel like last time we were talking, it was Transformers.
Transformers, right?
Yes,
It was Transformers, and yes, this is. I thought I saw Paul Scheer has a book coming out. I saw this new Bad Boys coming out. I was like, kismet, people.
This is amazing. I mean, what a triumph! And you know what? Can we just say congratulations on cinema's back? I feel like it's been such a funny turn, and I know that we all are interested in this, and you two are amazing writers in this world, but obviously, so many things have been failing. At the box office, whether it's Furiosa, The Fall Guy. And there's been this idea, well, IP is over. Well, remakes are over. Then this comes out and is a moderate hit, but a better hit than all the other ones. And they're like, but it's still not good enough. I feel like there is no winner here. No matter what you do, no one is happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like this should be like, okay, something is working here. I don't think it's prescriptive of what the box office should be, but I do feel like something is working because I don't think that this is all that different than Fall Guys. I just think it has a 30-year history, but then you could also argue that Furiosa has a 45 or 48-year history. So who knows?
Paul, everybody's just waiting for Twisters. That's what it is.
Guys, I don't want to oversell it, but I am truly in such a small part of Twisters. I was in not New Orleans. I was in Oklahoma. I was shooting a Super Bowl commercial that I was directing, and I happened to be on the flight as the directors and the producers. And they asked me, "Do you want to be at Twisters?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" I am in the final scene of Twisters. So, I will tell you this: I saw a little. I read the script. It is going to be awesome. Like, as a film fan, I am jazzed. But I think we are looking at Twisters and Deadpool and Wolverine as the saviors of summer. I feel like
absolutely.
But Twisters, to me, is Glenn Powell going to pull the Tom Cruise of the summer 2 in a row, bringing back cinema? It feels to me like it's the pump is primed for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I had originally pitched, hey, Paul, do you want to come on to the Twisters episode? And he's like, I'm in that. So he can't be on the episode, unfortunately. But Paul, before we get to our conversation about Bad Boys,
yes,
just a quick word about this book, Joyful Recollections of Trauma.
Yes.
I worked a little bit with Stephen Tobolowsky when he was putting out his memoir. And when actors put out memoirs, there's often this question of, oh, hey, can you tell the story of the time you worked with so-and-so and worked with this director and dish about this relationship? And Stephen chose not to take that direction with his book. And I think you've also taken a very different direction with your book. Tell us just a little bit about what approach you took for this book.
Well, Joyful Recollections of Trauma is out now. And the way that I've kind of approached this book was kind of heightening on the stories that I told from my childhood over the last 14 years on How Did This Get Made? So it is this kind of funny look back at my childhood, which is also traumatic. And I think it isn't the book that I intended to write, but it's a book that I'm so blown away by the response to, because I think people have gone in expecting one thing and come out really liking what they got instead. I think it's a tricky thing to write a memoir. And especially when you're somebody like me in my career, I got more career to talk about. I don't need to be recapping it. Like, save that for Barbara Streisand. I always remember that when Jamie Kennedy wrote like a memoir on the second season of the Jamie Kennedy Experiment, I was like, maybe a little too early. Maybe a little too early for this.
Wow.
Turned out actually right about the right time for him.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie Kennedy catching strays on the Filmcast here.
No offense, but it's hard. So I wanted to write something that was a little bit more general. Like, hopefully the idea is that it starts off with the people who know me and like me from the podcast, and it grows into something that's a little bit more, I guess, in the vein of like Jeanette McCurdy. That was a very inspirational book for me in reading it.
Well, I think it's just super cool. It's like it's an act of bravery, I think, to kind of
Oh,
expose your
yeah.
traumatic events from your childhood to the world at large. And I
Without it
think
being trauma dumping, and that's the most
right,
important thing. It's still going to be entertaining. The audiobook has got
exactly,
all
yeah.
these like special fun features. But yeah, you're right. It's I didn't realize it until it's out. Now it's not mine anymore, and it's kind of freeing and also scary.
Right, but it's so cool to see. I've seen the reaction on social media, like people
Yeah,
connecting to the stories and feeling less alone, and that's why you write books like this. And so I just think it's great.
absolutely.
Definitely check out "Joyful Recollections of Trauma." And now it's time to talk about probably the complete opposite of that, or not necessarily, depending on what where this conversation goes. But before we get into Bad Boys Ride or Die, Paul, we got to talk a little bit about our relationship to the Bad Boys franchise. Now,
Yes.
Jeff Kanata. This is Jeff Kanata's first time viewing any Bad Boys film. I think, is that correct?
So
It's
Jeff, are you coming
shockingly.
in without seeing the first three?
That's correct. And I
Wow.
told Dave as we were getting ready for this episode, I had that moment of Luke on the Millennium Falcon going, I shouldn't be. I'm endangering the mission. I shouldn't be coming. But I feel like yeah, this movie was not made for me. It's very much
Okay.
made for people that are steeped in this franchise. But
Well,
I'll interject my opinions as somebody completely new to it.
well,
Yeah,
I'm excited about that because
yeah,
here's what I'll say to you, Jeff. As a fan of yours, in my opinion, this movie is a throwback, regardless of whether or not you know anything about Bad Boys. This is an 80s, 90s. When it says Bruckheimer Simpson on the front of it,
Yeah,
it is
Yeah.
lightning bolt.
recalling the Bruckheimer Simpson that made them famous, not the Pirates of the Caribbean Bruckheimer.
right.
This
Right.
is the Bruckheimer Simpson, Top Gun,
The Rock.
Days of Thunder, The Rock, that
Yeah,
kind of when that lightning bolt hits, like a very hard R that's also really fun, which I will say, I feel like has been and is I'm a huge fan of Fast and Furious, but has been a little bit co-opted by the PG-13ification of this energy. And this is back to the hard R's.
I'm
Okay,
not a
this is
Fast
going to be a
and
tough
Furious
sell.
guy either. You
Okay,
know?
so it's going to be a real hard sell for you. I get it.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
But let's talk a little bit about the Bad Boys movies, Paul. I mean, Bad Boys 1, right? Michael Bay directed. I was a pretty big fan of that because it was kind of like these two rising creative forces
Mhm.
combining efforts for the first time. You have this amazing chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, and Michael Bay, who knows how to make every scene look like the most expensive music video ever made, and combining into like a cop action film of sorts. I don't know that the action in that movie was particularly great. I don't know that
No,
the
there
movie is
are
particularly.
moments in Bad Boys 1. I rewatched it maybe about 6 months ago. And you can tell they had a budget, but
Yeah,
not that big of a budget.
yep,
And at
yep.
one point, they just take a Hummer and smash through bicycles. And I was like, that is the perfect
Yep.
execution of about the right budget. And then there's another scene where they're just running through doors, like closed doors. It's kind of like Point Break meets Ferris Bueller, but it oddly works. Like when you look at where the franchise has gone, I mean, it is positively it's small. It's like indie
Yes.
movie small. It's like
Yes.
John
it's
Wick.
quaint.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
quaint.
it's quaint.
It is very quaint.
I would say even not even rising to the level of John Wick. Like
No, no.
yeah, but
John
it's like
John Wick, you can tell was made on a budget. The first one is made
Right.
on a budget, right? This like and I think it's Michael Bay showing off like he's not at the level where he can really do it
right.
all.
Yeah,
But it's a calling card.
yeah. So that was 1995. In 2003, Bad Boys 2 came out. In my opinion, one of the greatest action movies of all time. Right.
The only ding on Bad Boys 2, in my opinion,
Mhm.
is length. Right. I loved it when I watched it, but it's like 2.5 hours, right?
Yes.
Like,
It is an assault on the senses, is what it
yes.
is. Yeah.
And believe me, I loved it. It's one of those movies that I think is a little harder to go back to because it is like, wow, this is an opus. This is like a Lord of the Rings. I mean, we're going for it. Like, and by the way, I agree with you. It's, obviously been talked about in not Shaun of the Dead, but
Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz. I agree. One of my favorite all-time action movies. I'm just saying the slightest ding is the length.
I would say my biggest ding, which will come into play later on, is that the relationship between the two main characters was so unpleasant in that film. Like Will Smith spends most of the film kind of screaming at his partner, played by Martin Lawrence. They have kind of a very toxic relationship in that movie. I found. Yeah.
Can I tell you, back in the day, quick derail for 1 second. I was doing a commercial audition. I auditioned in New York, and they flew me out to LA for a callback, which I'd never done before. And they called out a handful of people from New York. I met a guy on this callback who was in Bad Boys 2. He was one of the gang. Like there's a group of cops in Bad Boys 2 that they, invade. Was it Cuba? They go to Cuba, or I don't remember where they go. They go to some country to blow the fucking country up. They're driving Humvees over like small shacks.
Before arriving at Guantanamo Bay, which is their savior. They're like, oh my God, thank God we got to Guantanamo Bay. Thank God.
So I was talking to one of those guys, and he told me the craziest story. He said, we're shooting this scene over the bridge, a classic scene. It's like going to the Florida Keys, that giant bridge that we've seen many a scene shot on since. And Michael Bay has like rigged cameras to every SUV. They're doing this chase, and this actor is like, I'm not a stunt driver. I'm not a stunt man. I am an actor. Right. He's like, so they put me behind the wheel of this car, and they're like, drive. There are stunt drivers around you. Like, they will protect you. And he didn't quite understand what that meant. And he's like, so I'm driving, and I have to be shooting my gun out the window. Right. And he's like, so these are things that I am not equipped to do. Like, I am in the car, I'm shooting a gun, I'm slating it myself, I'm driving on the Florida Keys. This bridge. And he goes, we do the first take, and he goes, and I am scared out of my mind because things are blowing up, right? I'm shooting, I'm trying to drive. I don't want to die. And I have to look like the toughest tough guy because I'm that guy. And he's a good guy, and he said, he shoots it, and he's like, okay, did I do it good? Michael Bay comes down. He has a monitor in front of him. That is everybody's camera that's shooting. So every car has their own camera on it. Comes down, makes a beeline right for his car, and is like, what the hell are you doing? You look like you've never shot a gun and drove a car before. He's like, I haven't. He's like, you better get on here. You better do it better. Like, just screaming at him. He's like, now I do it under the duress of Michael Bay. He's like, then we got it. But I do love that Michael Bay is putting people in that, like, that's the level of that movie in a nutshell to me. It's like, if we can physically pull it off, we will do it. I think we saw it in Ambulance too, where an ambulance on fire like crashes into like a camera. Like, he's going for it. He's always going for it.
I mean, there's action scenes in Bad Boys 2 that's like, that would be the culminating action scene of a normal action movie, but it's like there's like literally 6 of them in that movie.
It truly awesome action.
All right. So then Bad Boys for Life comes out in 2020. All right. And I got to say, at the time, I wasn't too hot on it. And in fact, we didn't even give it a main review on this podcast.
Wow.
Which is why
I didn't see it.
Is why Jeff didn't watch it. I was like so confused as to why that didn't happen. Bad Boys for Life, obviously new directors, Adil and Bilal, they took over. I think they're fairly worthy successors to Michael Bay. In this regard, and
absolutely,
they added a lot of lore into the Bad Boys universe, right?
Bad Boys 3 becomes straight up supernatural. No spoilers here, but I mean, we can spoil it now. There's witches in it.
Yes, there's witches.
The bad person is a witch, like, and straight up, like, not like, oh, they're like a witch. It's like, she a witch. And I will say, going to see that movie in the theater, I was a little bit apprehensive. We've been in a cycle of reboots and returning to franchises, and I love this franchise. And I remember I watched it, and I was like, oh, this kind of slaps. Like, I saw elements that I don't like the Vanessa Hudgens, that crew with Charles Melton. I mean, crazy Charles Melton is in this, coming in to be like the new Bad Boys crew. But I also thought they did some really cool things, which is like acknowledge their age. They're not young anymore. Now, what I do love about this franchise, and we'll talk about it in 4, is yes, they acknowledge they're old, but then they still kick ass, which I do appreciate in the grand scheme of like Fast and Furious. They never acknowledge like, we're old. Like, here, they're like, no, we're old, but then we're still going to do all the things that we could have done when we're 20. I thought it had humor. I thought it was fun. I would say, pleasantly surprised. And I went back before I was going to do this today with you to watch some scenes from it. I was like, that's actually pretty good. It's like solid, like not groundbreaking, but solid. And I was like,
exactly.
And yeah, so I give it a thumbs up.
We can all agree that naming the third movie For Life was bad.
Yeah,
that was
bad.
literally, I was going to bring that up. Is like, I mean, first of all, I don't think they knew they would be making a fourth one.
No way.
Right? So at the time,
you got to be optimistic. You got to leave yourself a option there.
Yeah,
but it was like a catastrophic blunder to title the third film "Bad Boys for Life." Yes. When they could have easily titled the fourth film "Bad Boys for Life," and that would have been perfect.
Right. Because it actually would have thematically worked as well.
Yes.
Again, I think that they thought that, look, we're not going to make another one. And, and I feel like this one, they definitely wrapped up a lot of fun storylines that you've been following through. But they also, I think Bad Boys 3 fell into the Macquarie Mission Impossible with Jeremy Renner thing, where it's like, okay, they're passing the baton, right? It's kind of going to be like they're here, but we're going to start a new Bad Boys franchise. I felt like there was an energy of that around that movie, and somewhere like Mission Impossible in the middle, you're like, well, no, I don't care about the Bad Boys world. I just want I want these two guys. That's what I want.
I don't care about the marketing umbrella of Bad Boys.
Yes,
I just like seeing Will Smith and Martin Lawrence hang out. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, which brings us to Bad Boys Ride or Die, out in theaters right now. Let's start with overall thoughts. Paul Scheer, what'd you think of this movie?
Okay. Again, I go to see this on a Friday, excited to be there. Found myself the same way I found myself in Fast and Furious, laughing, hooting, and hollering. It gives me a response to a film that I don't often get. And I think why I'm responding this way, it's the same way I responded to Plane. And I would also argue Beekeeper. It's like, yeah, let's go back to this. Dumb, fun, and what kind of blew me away right at the start, and I'm not going to get into it, I just overall thought was like, this is better than it needs to be. Directing wise, I was like, whoa, they make a choice, and we'll get into it, but they make a choice in the beginning. The way that they show the scene in the wedding with Martin Lawrence, I was like, oh shit, we're in for something. And throughout the movie, it does these pops that felt like, to me, like what I loved about Crank 2 High Voltage. I feel like it's like Crank 2 meets Tarsum, and visually, like they're just doing cool. Like it doesn't feel like they're aping Michael Bay. These two directors are doing their own thing.
Yes.
And I gotta say, like, I like the chemistry. And are there parts that feel like they lag a little bit? Sure. Like, I think that Bad Boys is always a movie that like errs on the side of more dialogue scenes than they need to be, but I'm also down with it. Like, I'm okay with it. Like, it oddly all pays off at the end, but there's moments where I'm like, you didn't need all of this. We got to cut this one a little bit tighter.
Yeah. Bad Boys is kind of like, they have scenes talking about the concept of Bad Boys as well as singing the Cops theme song,
which I'm always looking forward to.
Right. In the same way that like the Fast and Furious franchise talks about family. Like that's kind of they both deploy those concepts to similar magnitude, basically.
And by the way, they've kept on the supernatural world because this movie does involve ghosts. And I would say that at the end of it, I was like, I think that it might be, if I'm ranking, 2-4 as my top two.
I think that's a very defensible ranking for sure.
Okay, but go. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say one quick thing, and then I want to hear what Jeff had to say about it. But I'll say what I loved about this movie is every single action scene in this movie seemed like it was made from the perspective of how can I, or we the filmmakers, show the audience something different, right?
Yes.
How can we shoot this in a different way than it has ever been shot before? This time we're going to use first-person perspective drones to shoot this one. This time we're going to have you going into a monitor Like
Yes.
you're going to be in the cat, and you're going to go into a monitor, and then we're going to be in the scene, and then we're going to come back out of a monitor. Like every scene had something that was kind of creative
Well,
or interesting.
the camera
Yeah.
rig gun. I mean, the
Yes, camera rig
Doom
gun,
gun.
yeah.
Apparently, I talked to my friend. They've been trying to use that in multiple movies, and they've been pitching it. No one has taken them up on it, and it oddly is a perfect use because it wasn't overdone either. It's not a whole movie. It's not like that
Right.
that Rock movie, where they're trying to make you feel
Right.
like. But it was like, oh, this is fun. It feels like Call of Duty for a second. Like great,
Yeah.
but enough that you don't feel like it doesn't. Nothing overstays its welcome, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree completely. Paul's referring to this rig where it basically is able to switch between a first person perspective view of the gun and then turn around and show the person holding the gun. That's like what the rig
It's
does.
pretty
Right?
amazing. It's like the gun is like on like a catapult that flips it. It's like it's honestly like the way that you would use your iPhone, like to be like, I'm
Right.
taping a concert. This is me at the concert.
This is
like
me at
it's
the
like,
concert. Right?
Yeah, it's very cool. And I guess what I will say, and I know we're already talking about the movie, but clearly Will Smith knew and could use it well. Martin Lawrence, not so much, because like I feel like that sequence was going to be a little bit better, but like you clearly could tell, like Martin didn't really get how to do that. I wouldn't also want to put that rig on him.
I'm at the shooting of the guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had a blast with this movie. I thought the chemistry between the two of them is back. Like the like Bad Boys 2, I was talking to you earlier, Paul, like they spend so much of that movie like yelling at each other. It's like not great. And then like this one, the bad boys are back. Their chemistry is back. They like each other again. They're connecting to each other poignantly. The action scenes are great. I really had a great time with Bad Boys Ride or Die. Jeff Kanata, what was your reaction to this movie?
Boy, I'm bracing.
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my reaction to Bad Boys Ride or Die is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, let's hear the limerick.
Actually, I have two. I have two limericks.
Two limericks for Bad Boys
The
Ride or
first
Die.
one is, I'm not one who often enjoys a mindless plot full of loud noise. I'll take the fall and argue with Paul because this puts the bad in Bad Boys.
Wow.
All right, second limerick. It might be my own viewing gaps that made my enjoyment collapse. But funny scenes with Lawrence, Will Smith ain't enough to make a film that slaps.
All right. So
I did not have fun with this. I
Okay.
hear you guys, I don't want to be the party pooper pooping on the party because I love hearing you guys talk about it. As I said, I had no context for this movie, and a lot of this movie is like picking up threads from the previous movies and just
But I would
assumes you're
argue-
familiar with stuff.
But I would argue also, and I don't want to. I think that I want to give over to your critique and say, not that much. You're not walking into Return of the King, okay? Like this can be enjoyed as a standalone. Yes, there are payoffs. Like you probably are missing the payoff of the son-in-law, Martin's son-in-law. Like that's a payoff.
Right.
That's not.
Well, to quote unquote defend Jeff a little bit, I will say you will enjoy this movie much more, Paul, if you have recently seen Bad Boys 3. Because
I think
all that stuff with his son and, all
Sure.
that comes, Will Smith's character's son, all that comes into play. And
Yeah, oh, right.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
right.
well,
That is
also
important.
it sort of assumes a familiar. It's like, hey, isn't it just great to be around these guys again? And I'm like,
Right.
Yeah.
I acknowledge their chemistry, and I think they have
Right.
great chemistry. But I didn't have that
I get
level
you.
of camaraderie yet.
Yeah.
Now, I will
I'll tell you. I'll say one thing
Go
too.
ahead.
As I was leaving the theater, I bumped into a friend who was bringing his son for the first time. His son's like in 8th grade, and his son has never seen a Bad Boys movie. Did love it. Walked out and said, "Now I want to watch the rest." And I'm curious, like I wonder if you might fall in this perfect middle ground of it being like it has no history, so there's nothing to enjoy there, and you are not super a fan of these movies, so there's definitely like you are really in this like this desert of like,
Yeah.
it's like, this is not going to work for me. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, to calibrate it based on your examples from earlier in the conversation, I loved Plane.
Okay,
I thought
great.
Plane was awesome.
Yeah.
I hated Beekeeper.
Whoa.
Hated it.
Okay.
Hated it. So
Okay.
I don't know what that says about me.
No, I love this.
Yeah.
It means to me that you like what you like and you don't like what you don't like. To me, I'm an easy sell. Like if you're going to put Gerard Butler in it and have him ripping somebody's throat out at the White House, I'm in. Right? White House. Yeah.
I just thought there was like a cool Plane had like a cool. The premise itself was interesting, and they it wasn't stupid. You know what I mean?
Right. I get that.
It wasn't overtly like dumb at you. Anyway, this isn't a review of Plane. Let me explain I mostly want to hear what you guys say about this movie because it clearly wasn't for me, but I want to explain my experience at the beginning of this movie because the first scene of this movie is, we're in this car, we're like just picking right up. Like it felt like we were just right after the end of the last movie. I don't know if that's the truth, but it felt like we're right, we're kind of jumping on a moving train. And they go into this convenience store, and that scene, like you guys are talking about, I love the inventiveness of the camera's up their nose. And it's I love how it's shot, and it's wacky and it's goofy, and there's kind of fun, witty repartee, and it establishes how awesome these guys are. Like, we're not going to get worried about this thing that's happening right here because we're so awesome. I was like, I'm on board. This is great. Okay. I am into this. I am like, let's have a blast. This is funny. These guys, their banter's great. I'm digging it. And then I feel like the movie, for me, just kind of grinds to a halt and like diverts into this weird near-death experience that just none of that worked. It felt very contrived. It felt to me, and again, I'm making a lot of assumptions because I don't have the context of the previous movies, but it felt to me like this movie was trying so hard to take established characters, which I assumed to be super confident Will Smith and kind of scaredy pants Martin Lawrence, and flip-flop them and give Martin Lawrence a reason to not be scaredy pants anymore and put Will Smith in this situation where he's now having panic attacks. And I was like, it just felt so contrived and clumsy the way they get there. Well, and maybe I'm just reading it completely wrong, but it just didn't work for me at all.
I'll tell you this much, Jeff. Because I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that Bad Boys 4 is maybe the second best Bad Boys. But I will say this. You have to acknowledge and justify Martin Lawrence's physical shape in this movie, right? Like, and I say that, and I hope that he is healthy. I hope that everything is going well. But like, there is something even from Bad Boys for Life to this that he does not look fully well. So to give him a heart attack in the beginning of this movie and to put the movie at least on the shoulders of that, I found to be an ingenious like invention, because it's sort of like, yeah, you can't just have him shoulder to shoulder with Will Smith. Like, we have to be like, you just had a heart attack. You shouldn't be out. You should not be running. You don't look well.
Well,
and
go
I
ahead.
think that's persuasive, actually.
Yeah. Well, what's great about it too is I was I recently played at a World Series of Poker tournament, and I
saw that.
The guy next to me, he was like this really good looking, like he looked like he was 6'2", really good looking dude. He looked like he was like late 40s maybe, and he's talked about, you're playing poker for like 6 hours with these people, so he started talking, and he talked about how like he had a stroke, and it had completely altered his whole perspective on life, right? Like, and that happens in this movie, and that's honestly, I think it creates a more interesting dynamic between these two, because Martin Lawrence is basically like, I can't die. Like that's kind of Martin Lawrence's thing in this movie. He's like, I can't die. It's not my time yet, and so that does explain why he would do any of the shit he does in this movie, right?
Because
if he didn't, right, then he'd be like, this is terrifying. I don't want to do any of this stuff, right?
I also think what it does in the beginning, again, and this is what we were talking about, beautifully shot way to show a heart attack. I mean, they start off at Will Smith's wedding, which is not a spoiler because it's the first scene of the movie.
Yeah.
But he's finally getting married, And I think this movie is also doing something interesting, which is apologizing. This is Will Smith's like first kind of foray back into cinema after the slap. You know, yes, I know he had that Apple movie, but like I feel like his grand, like this is his I'm back moment. And I think that, you know, there's a line on that wedding scene where it's like, you know, I finally realized I can't act the way I act, and, you know, or whatever. And like, yeah, but you're 50. Right. And it was like, oh yeah, right. He's 50. Like, I think that there's certain elements. And I feel like what you're talking about with the panic attacks and feeling like he messed up because he was there when Joey Pants, their captain, got killed. I think it is, I don't want to go this deep into it, but I do think that like this movie and let's go to Mission Impossible are both movies that are kind of publicly apologizing for past public transgressions. I think that Tom Cruise in gosh, I forget which Mission Impossible it is. It's kind of saying like, yes, this is me. I made a little bit of a mistake. Accept me back into the world. This is him. And I think so. They're doing two things here that I think, yes, you're right. They're swapping their personalities a little bit, but I still think Will Smith is badass and trying to be cool. He just has moments of panic. I mean, the panic attacks hit at weird moments, but he's still got his cockiness. I don't know. So I found it to be interesting that this movie is trying to do that and also be this like big summer blockbuster too.
Yeah, I'll just say this, and I'd like to get to spoilers momentarily. I think what I will acknowledge about what Jeff's saying is the movies are extremely silly. I have to say,
Yes.
like I don't think they can really be taken that seriously. Just as an example, the ending of Bad Boys 2, if that happened in real life, it would be an international incident.
Oh yeah.
Like where these cops, I think they go to Cuba, they destroy tons of property, they kill tons of people, they wind up on the like edge of Guantanamo Bay. You know, like all this stuff happens, and it's like, but it does nothing that happens in previous movies, you know, really negatively impacts what happens in the future movies. And so it's just kind of like you just have to accept they're going to get into these wild over the top adventures, and that's kind of what the
Well,
what
it's
the what
very
the movie's selling,
80s.
right?
It's
Right.
very 80s, 90s. You know,
Yes.
it like, I mean, look, you know, Lethal Weapon 2, Mel Gibson ties his truck to like stanchions on a house built into the Hollywood Hills and rips it off its stanchions, right? Like there would
Yeah.
be penalties for these
Yeah,
things, right? Like,
that
you know,
level. It's that
yeah,
level, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right, exactly. And so I think that like this movie, what I appreciate about
There
it,
would be
if
penalties.
I'm standing back a little bit, is this:
Yeah.
they killed Joey Pants, Joe Pantoliano, in 3.
In the
That's a
third movie, yeah.
bummer,
Yeah.
yeah, for me because I like that character. So they figure out a way to bring him back, which was kind of perfect. Like he is part of this franchise. He is an element of it. They do a good job of it. I also think that this movie feels more cohesive as a sequel to 3
Yes.
than 2 felt to 1.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, you talk about that opening chase scene. That's how 3 opens. It's like like the first 3, they're going to Martin's daughter's giving birth to a baby. This one, they're racing to Will Smith's wedding. So they're going to. So I felt like there were things, and I thought that like coming off of Catwoman, the shelved Catwoman
Yes.
or Batgirl. Sorry, Batgirl. So sorry.
Yes, Batgirl, yeah.
These two guys, I feel like you have 4 people here. These 2 directors, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence to a certain extent, going, we all have something to prove. So let's not play it safe. Let's just blow it out. Let's try to do everything that we want to do. And that's from a directing standpoint. I think it's from an acting standpoint. And I think that in that level, they don't play it safe. They don't make a PG-13 movie. They are just going balls to the wall. And I do agree that like there might be things in here where you're like, okay. And I think that's that first act that you're talking about probably is the fattest as far as all these plot points. Like Rhea Seehorn, Ray, sorry,
Ray, yeah.
amazing, right? I love her as an actress. I don't know if that plot line and Joey Pants's daughter, like it's like they put them in interesting positions, but it kind of felt like, okay, we need this here. Like there's a lot of setup for stuff that I didn't even think was that much of a payoff in a weird way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, a little bit more to discuss about Bad Boys Ride or Die. Why don't we do spoilers for this movie starting right now? Paul, just to explicitly discuss it in detail, like the part where Martin Lawrence has a heart attack and then he kind of falls into the sunken place.
It's cool.
Is really, really cool. And it's like, oh wow, this movie has visual aspirations beyond
Right.
a lot of other Bad Boys movies.
Well, that's
right?
what actually made me lean in. I was like, whoa, we're doing something so cool. And you talked about that monitor into a prison scene. Like they do that in 3 where you're watching like something happen in a prison laundry. It pulls out of a monitor. Then we're actually a security guard. Like they've been doing cool stuff. And I felt like they were like, whatever Michael Bay or Jerry Bruckheimer said was like, go and make your thing. And I feel like Martin Lawrence and Will Smith were along for that ride because that's the Tarzan moment. He has a heart attack. He falls through the floor into the sunken place. He's on a beach. There's something very exciting about that. Like, I'm like, oh, you can do. And I didn't feel like that since Crank 2, honestly, to be like, oh, we're putting DPs on skateboards and smashing video cameras. Like, let's go for it. Like, why aren't we doing more experimental stuff in these movies? It didn't feel like the bad CGI that I've seen. Like, I felt like, it still felt tactile, which is something I really appreciate so much so. And I'm going to skip ahead for spoilers to say that there's a giant crocodile in this movie and way more fulfilling than any CGI creature I've seen in recent memory. To have a fucking giant crocodile that is a threat of, and yes, there are crocodiles in this movie.
Yeah, and the crocodile looks pretty good too. It looks like they actually built like a practical something to make that happen.
It is funny how they keep like cutting to the bad guys in their bad guy lair, like orchestrating things, and in the background there's like this weird monster, and I'm like, what is
it? And then they save the reveal that it is an old like gator farm or amusement park. It's like the modern equivalent of like the Simpsons fireworks factory. It's like, when are we going to get to the gator park for the final action scene?
Well, and that's what I thought was actually so fun. I mean, that's the sense of fun that I feel like we are missing in action movies. Like action movies to me, and I agree with you, Jeff, like a movie like Plane is kind of fun. It feels like an old Harrison Ford kind of throwback, like an Air Force One, right?
Right.
I think that we're missing this middle ground of just like we're blowing stuff up, Demolition Man, Lethal Weapon, like these things where it's like, yeah, put them in a gator farm. Like, who cares? Like, like we're doing things that are like, it should be a little bit feel good in a way. Like that's maybe the wrong term, but it's like, it can be goofy. It doesn't have to like live in this world, because I feel like all I've seen lately in action movies are villains in very antiseptic white layers, very like computer tech based. And it's like, that's no fun. I want to go back to, Die Hard 2 and things like that. Like, so I do appreciate like just the throw it at the wall. Like, yeah, this whole final act is going to be alligators on the loose and we are defeating these bad guys. And we got that camera gun, the Doom gun.
Yes.
There's like so much stuff happening there.
It isn't, just to be clear, it is an alligator themed amusement park. That's what it is.
Oh, I mean, I think anyone who's been to Florida has done. I mean, when I was a kid, I went to those places where they give you like frozen fish and you throw it at the alligators and they just eat it. Like it's James Bond Live and Let Die. They take a place at a gator park, and gator parks are real.
I'm just gonna put this out there: if you are a bad guy looking to set up your lair,
you could do worse.
There's some real trade-offs setting it up at the alligator themed amusement park.
You know who I really liked in this movie too? I mean, the bad guy, Eric Dane, who you probably know a lot from like these, I feel like CBS dramas, right?
Yeah.
Like, or something like
SWAT.
he's got a good look to him. And I feel like he's got like the, and excuse the term, because I think he's great in the movie, but like a poor man's, who's the guy from Justified?
Timothy Olyphant, Walton Goggins?
Yeah, it's like Timothy Olyphant kind of thing. And I loved him. I bought him as this guy. He wasn't superhuman, right? That's the other thing too. The punches and the fights in this movie aren't like, yes, they break glass a lot, but it's not like one punch is breaking a house. I feel like people, they're exploding stuff. They're shooting at people. Like, they're not like insurmountable villains. So much so that I also loved the woman who was the head of ammo in Bad Boys 3, who's now like, I guess the DA. What is
Rita?
Rita? Is that Rita? The one who's not the one who's like
who's married to the guy who betrays them?
Yeah. Which, by the way, I have to say, I kind of saw that coming immediately, because there's no reason that needs to be two characters unless one of them is going to betray the other one, right?
100%. I'm like, the minute we introduce Reed Richards, the original Mr. Fantastic, I was like, done. Villain,
Yeah,
bad guy, got
he
it.
is the bad guy. He is the bad guy immediately, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no hiding that guy is the bad guy.
Yeah. But yeah, the Bad Boys movies have always had like some pretty over the top cartoony villains, and I think this guy Eric Dane does a solid job.
That
Paul,
opening scene where you meet him and he kills like the bookie or the money launderer, I was like, this is a great action scene.
yeah,
Like it's
it's
just a very
it's upsetting. It's
yeah,
upsetting.
it is.
Yeah. We got to talk about Reggie, Paul Scheer. Now,
Yes. Jeff,
Reggie
I
is
feel
a
so bad. I feel like, I mean,
No.
what are you thinking about? Do you like any of the bad guy action here? Do you like that? Do you like
I
Jeff?
thought, I liked, like you said, I like that guy's look at that scene where he murders that guy and he describes how they're going to find the scene.
Yeah.
I thought that was clever.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. I one of the things you said earlier that I'll pick up on, which is, how this served two purposes and sort of needed to rehabilitate Will Smith. I recognize that as well, but it felt like the entire purpose of the panic attacks was to get to the slap.
Right.
It felt so contrived to build to that moment where Martin Lawrence slaps him back. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess we had to do that.
Well, I don't know. It's funny because
me.
I thought in a weird way, in the beginning of the movie, when he gets like toe to toe with that FBI agent, and they go, I'm like, oh, is he gonna slap? Is he gonna slap again? What a bold like fuck you, like in a way to be like
down on it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was right to do it, and then I kind of forgot about it. So at that when he does have that panic attack again, I thought it was like when he does the slap, I was like, oh, what a good way to do it, because I also think the interesting thing about the movie. And this is maybe my misreading of it. I don't know what you think about this, David, but like, I felt like he was having a panic attack, not because he let Joey Pants die, because he would have had that in the Bad Boys 3, technically. Was because he had like stakes now. He was married. He had like something to fight for. I thought it was a little confused, in my opinion, to make it about, oh, I was responsible for this guy dying. That felt to me like that should have been, then you should have killed him. And it was sort of like, oh, we got to figure out a way to connect it all, whatever. So Joey Pants can say, it's not your fault, man. You're not your fault. It's like, but to me, I felt like it was more powerful to be like, oh, this is a guy who over the course of these 3 movies never has anything in his life. He doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't have a child, doesn't have anything. So he's reckless. And the minute he does, he realizes, oh, my actions have consequences. And I thought that was actually more powerful storytelling wise than the Joey Pants, but the Joey Pants kind of all ties together.
Yeah, I kind of lean more on Jeff Canada. Like, I really enjoyed the movie. I kind of lean more on Jeff Canada's side on this one, in the sense that it does feel to me like a way. I don't think they really focus too much on his relationship with his wife in this movie.
No.
So it does feel to me like a way to reverse engineer their way to Martin Lawrence slapping him at the end, which this movie was made after the slap happened, right? Like, it was filmed after the slap happened.
This movie was made right on the tail end of the strike, because I remember it was shooting in Atlanta, the actor strike. And people were going down to shut down the set. And so there, it was done during the writer's strike, which is why I think you're seeing more action sequences. Like the fight in the elevator, I'm like, oh, we need to shoot some more stuff. And it was a great fight, fun fight. I think Reggie's fight might have been partly due to the writers and actors strike. It's like, oh, we can shoot these amazing action sequences. And in a weird way, that may have actually helped this movie, because they could lean more into creative action scenes.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, it was after the slap.
Right. The only thing I'll say about that is I do think it's fun the way the movie acknowledges it. I do think it's a little bit contrived how it gets to that point of him slapping him. I will just say I don't think Will Smith's image, quote unquote, needs rehabilitating. I think he is largely beloved, and I think most people don't care about the slap. That's kind of my perception.
I agree, unless you're Stephen A. Smith, who had a very big diatribe about it. It's so interesting. There are certain things that happened during the pandemic and during the writer's strike, and where people are home, they're not working. And when they're not working, these things get really blown up. We start talking about them in a way like, because there's nothing else taking our attention away. And there's something really funny when you look back on it now. You're like, okay, sure, like he slapped this guy. He slapped him. right? Like he didn't beat the shit out of him, but we treated it like, and then the people are like, oh, he could have killed him. It's like, like, was the wrong etiquette, right? Wrong etiquette.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Uncool. Uncool. Right.
Not cool, not respectful. All these things are true, but also not the biggest problem of all, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not the biggest problem of all. Like, he had a moment, he had a freak out. We've all had freakouts. And look, he did something that he regrets. He apologized for it. He's been penalized for it. And I felt like the movie gave it the right level of like,
Yes, I think so.
that's it,
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I didn't read it so much as an apology in the context of the movie, almost like, hey, look, we can all laugh at this.
Yeah, we're
now.
acknowledging
Right.
that this is a thing that happened.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Paul, did you see this like viral video of Will Smith greeting fans outside of a screening of?
Oh yeah, it's Cinemark in Baldwin
And it's
Hills.
like, yeah, people just still love him, and the box office says it, the TikTok say it, like people still love Will Smith, and so I think this is a movie that really proves that to continue to be true. But anyway, let's talk about Reggie real quick. This is a character that was introduced, I think, as a joke in Bad Boys 2, right?
100%. I mean, this character is almost like commedia dell'arte. Like, it's like it is, and the way that he's introduced in 2 and 3, the way he like shows up like as a mumble-mouthed like idiot. Like
it's like, oh, this is the movie with its language is saying this is a character that is okay for everyone to laugh at. That's kind of what the movie says with the way it portrays things. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, guy's a total John Wick-esque badass in this movie. And
they set up in 3 that he's in the military.
He's in the Marines, right?
Yeah, he's in the Marines. And whoa, I mean, the payoff on that was, and I kind of felt like they did a beautiful job in the way. I mean, the movie ends on him looking down the barrel of the camera, being like,
"Yes,
did it?" Like the movie, it's oddly his movie.
It's weird. It's weird, but yeah, like you have to. What I can't even come up with a good analogy of like. This is like a complete side. It's not even a side character. It's like a side character.
Yeah, it's like a joke character. Basically, it gives Martin a chance to react about his daughter not marrying the right guy. I mean, that's it really is like just it's a trampoline for Martin to just jump off of, to be like, my daughter's married this fucking idiot. And that's it. And for it to come full circle was brilliant.
Yeah, it was.
It's like if the whole series became about Urkel.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right.
No, but Urkel's like a major character. Like it would be
that's
like
what I'm saying. This whole series did become about Urkel.
Right.
It would almost be like.
I get it now. Yeah.
I mean, but it has a feeling a little bit of the way that in Die Hard, the driver, kind of comes in and saves the day at the end. I mean, but not in such a. But it's like, oh, this is like a funny character. This is a side character. And, you feel like there's some triumph there, which I thought was just fun. I mean, and that sequence was great.
Incredible.
Like that was a great action sequence. And that's what these two directors, I'm on board. I'm very bummed that we didn't get to see their Batgirl after seeing this.
Totally.
Well, if anything, this is like, I can't believe they shelved a movie that these guys made. Like this is a very solid action movie that obviously crowd pleasing, is doing well at the box office, is like, you got to nurture this talent,
I also wonder, and I have not seen Batgirl, but it felt to me like directors who don't care, like it was like, we're putting it all out there, we're going to do everything. And I think probably for them to come back and do Bad Boys 4, probably not what they wanted to do. They probably wanted to use Bad Boys 3 as a launching pad to go make Batgirl. They directed Miss Marvel, which I thought had a great style to it, the pilot especially, where they, and I think part of it, not like they're coming back with their tail between their legs, but it's like, we're coming back to this thing. We would rather be a little bit higher up in the directors. I feel like they pulled out all the stops, and I tip my hat to like Michael Bay, who has made a cameo now in the last 2 movies, as really like giving them every tool that they need, and making and allowing them to kind of go all out and do it, because it was impressive. Like, you don't normally recognize the directing in these movies. I can't tell you that much. In a lot of these big movies, like, oh, the directing is good, but the directing does it's fun to watch.
I agree. I agree. It's a blast. All right. Any other thoughts about Bad Boys Ride or Die? Any other sequences to mention? Or shall
I
we
will
wrap
say
it up?
that
Yeah.
I think that this movie, I know I said that sometimes the dialogue scenes get a little lost. I think they did a good job of humanizing a lot of characters, which is, I think, hard to do in these movies. Yes, I agree that Will Smith's wife is barely a character. She doesn't
Yes.
need to be ultimately, because she's not a part of the plot, right? She's kidnapped at the very end. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. But what we do get to see is like Vanessa Hudgens and that other guy who looks like Alexander Skarsgård, but it's not. Um,
I think
you
you're
know,
thinking of Alexander Ludwig, who
yes,
plays her boyfriend, right? Kind of in this movie.
those are two of the members of the team of this team
Yeah.
ammo, the third being the woman that was married to or engaged to Ian, the
Yeah.
bad guy.
Yes.
I feel like they gave those characters some weight. It was kind of fun. They put some stuff on, like, some meat on the bones of these characters. And yes, is it forced? I don't know. This, like, relationship between Will Smith and his son, and I there were elements to it. I was like, this movie shouldn't be trying this hard to be good. And I think I appreciated that across the board. It's like, okay, yes, we're going to continue the story about Will Smith and his son. He's not just like going to let him rot in a prison. Like, he's been visiting him. We're going to like bring in these, we're not just going to toss away the ammo characters. We're going to kind of isolate them and bring them in. I felt like they did a really good job of making it feel cohesive instead of episodic. And that was, to me, along with the directing and I think the camaraderie between these guys, it just all felt like, oh, they were like, everyone tried to make something really good. And I left being, yeah, you did it. You did it indeed. I felt that energy. It felt really exciting to me.
Speaking of Mike Lowry's son, I do have to just acknowledge that was one of my favorite action scenes in the whole movie. Was when he took out all those dudes in the prison yard.
Oh
Oh
I've
yeah.
never
yeah.
seen anything
We
like
use the
that before.
weights. The
He
weights
used
in
the
such
Yeah.
cool
weights.
ways.
He like
Yeah.
took his prison outfit and tied it through a weight hole and like used it as a freaking slingshot type
That's what I'm
thing.
saying. Like, you just mentioned that. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, this
Yeah.
movie is full of action set pieces that are not CGI racing, car
Yes.
driving. Like they are for all intents and purposes, I felt like I was watching a very practical movie. Like, it
Yeah.
felt like the explosions are really happening. This, like, the fact they put in this old amusement park, they could blow the hell out of that dock and make it look good. Like, it just felt real and fun and varied. It was like fist fights, knife fights, car chases, drone things. Like, there was so many
Yeah.
elements to it that, again, I walk away going, I'm on board for these two directors. Like, let's see what else they can do, what else their palette is. Because, and I think you have to toss your hat to the writers too. One of them is a first timer, I think, even, which is impressive. But yeah, I walked away impressed with that. Like, there's a ton of really fun sequences here.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. If you are a Bad Boys fan, Bad Boys Ride or Die totally delivers. If you're not into this franchise at all, mixed.
You may
Some
not still
people,
be. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you may not
Although
still be.
I honestly, I want to go back and at least watch Bad Boys 2 now because everyone says that's the best
Yes.
one. So
I think you have
I'll
to
give that a
watch
shot.
it knowing that it has, to me, and I know I said this in the beginning, it is prime Michael Bay bloat, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think Armageddon has that. I think Michael Bay, unfortunately, doesn't know how to make stuff tighter because he's so in
Right.
love with every shot. And I think you could go back and do like one of those phantom edit passes on all of his
Right.
movies, and it would actually make them a little bit better, because it just sort of, like, yes, we got the slow-mo, the shirt blowing open, the sun, it's like, it does look good. But I think that these movies, like, at the 2 hour mark, I was like, great, this feels like, when it got to about an hour 45, I was like, great, we got this 15-minute long end scene. Like, I was not watching the time, but it felt right. Like, a minute longer, it might even tip the scales in another direction. But they really do. I think once they get to that third act, like once they get to the houseboat, you're like, oh, we're in. Like, once they realize that the mayor is bad, it is
Yeah.
just a rocket to the end.
Right, right. It's interesting something you just said, Paul. Jerry Seinfeld been in the news for saying some really
Oh yes, that
objectionable
Hugh
things lately.
Grant is the perfect man of masculinity.
But there's something that Jerry Seinfeld said a while ago that I think he said this, but that like there's a massive difference when you're watching, let's say, a comedian who is on for 5 minutes too long versus 5 minutes too short, quote unquote. Like if it's too long, it's like horrible. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that was brutal. But if he just like cuts his set short a little bit, it's like, oh, that was delightful. Or I could have used a little more of that. Like
the leave
that's
him
such a
wanting
different
more
feeling,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
You
You-
always should be leaving people wanting more. I feel like it's a very hard thing
Yeah.
to understand. As somebody who performs live on stage a lot, there is this thing of like you know when you lose it. Like I've done shows where I'm like, oh, it just went on to just a little bit
Just
too
like
long. Like
2 minutes, and it could
eh,
have been
yeah.
perfect, right?
It's
Yeah.
hard. I think that like especially like you fall in love with a lot of shots, and to me, whether it's writing this book, whether writing comic books, whether making it the shows that I've made, it's a science, and inevitably you're going to kill things that you love. But if you're doing that, no one will ever say, "I wish it was like." I wish it was longer is the best compliment you could
Right.
ever possibly get.
Absolutely.
I stand
Absolutely.
by that. Like I truly believe that like leave people wanting more. Everyone's got so much to digest. Like just get in, get out. Don't overstay your welcome. Which is, I'm also creating the death of my own industry because it's like, well, that's why we're having like 8 episode orders now instead of 12 or 10. But I do think it's important.
All right. Well, Paul Scheer is an actor who's appeared in shows and films like The League and also Twister's coming out later this summer. He's the co-host of How Did This Get Made and the author of the new book, Joyful Recollections of Trauma.
Yes.
Check it out wherever your books can be found. Paul Scheer, thanks for joining us today on this podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. And Jeff, I appreciate that you sat there. Can I ask one more question of you? I know that you saw
Absolutely.
it. Were you in a packed theater?
No, I saw this at a press screening, so it was mostly empty. Yeah.
I will say that there is and look, you're press. You've seen a lot of things. I know that you watch probably primarily a lot of things, but I will say that this is a great crowd movie. Like it really is like, it's the same way I felt about, I don't know if that movie Megan is good, but man, and the crowd, I was like, this is great. Like, and that's the argument for theaters, it's like to see it with people that are on the same wavelength is a good thing.
That's a great point.
At the end of the day, it's really impressive that Adil and Bilal made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.